Hi, this is T with teaquilts, and I'm here today to talk about string quilts. I wanted to first show you where I store my strings. I actually used one of the closet organizers that I received free in the mail from purchasing the velvet hangers. So I used it instead to store my scraps in, and it's a double-sided bin. So in the middle, let me tilt the camera up a little. You can see where there is a divider in the middle, and I could take that out if I want, but I kind of like having it divided sometimes because I can look at one side and toss over to the other side, the rejects. So I've already started. I'm actually working on a border for a quilt top. And so I have taken some of the things and started sorting my scraps. These scraps here, as I was looking through the bin, they were too short for the project that I'm currently working on. And then in this bag here were things that appear to be 1.5 inch cut strips that are in this bin that I'm actually going to sew together and make something else with. So that's been put aside. And then I also don't know how I put the 1.5 inch solid strippings in here, so I'm moving it because I do have a place where these go, so they're going to be stored somewhere else. And then these pieces here are some of the fabrics that are still longer pieces that I could use. I'm just looking for other choices because I've already cut 4 pieces from them, and I'm trying to only use each fabric once in each side of the border. So over here, I've already started cutting strips that I plan to sew together into borders. I have some already at the ironing station where I've already pressed them, so they're ready to be sewn. So let me go sew these into strips and I'll come right back. Okay, so I've been gone quite a while. I've actually made 2 borders that I've sewn onto the quilt top, and now I have just finished my 3rd border. So I wanted to make sure I got my technique down before I came back. So what I've done is I've sewn all of the strips into a strip set, and how I determine that, how long I need it, or approximately how long I need it, is I lay the folded quilt on the floor or on this table, and then I go ahead and make a length of border that's slightly bigger than my quilt, and sometimes it may be about 5 to 6 inches longer because I am sewing strips into pairs, and then pairs into 4s, and then 4s into 8. So it could be slightly longer than what I need. So I'll show you that. I have the quilt folded into 4s just so I can fit it on my work surface. Then I lay my piece on top so I can approximate how much I need. And so I will just pan so you can see. The pink on the end right here, but my quilt stops right here. So that's one end, and then the other end is down here. And my phone is ringing. I'm going to pause for a minute. Okay, I'm back, and I just wanted to show you the first step of the process here. So I'm going to remove the bottom. And then this is a great time. I don't know if the camera is actually picking it up, but I'm going to try to zoom in. so that you can see. When I was sewing, I didn't care about strings or if they were in the seams. So I got some here. And then as I slide down, I've got a little string in this area. More in this area up here. So strings are completely throughout the quilt piecing. And I don't really care about that when I'm piecing. I actually take care of it now when I'm about to trim it to the right size. So I'm going to zoom out. And I will get just a few of these pieces on camera, but for the most part I'm going to cut the camera off because that would be boring. And if I need to, I have a pair of snips that I've buried somewhere. This is real life, folks. Oh, it's up here. I was actually organized for once, but they're not in their right position, but that's okay. So if I'm pulling anything and it won't come out on its own, then I use the snips to cut. Like right here, that's bunching up my fabric. So I don't keep pulling it, I just go ahead and cut with some snips. That's already tight. So I'm going to do that down the entire length of this border, and when I'm done, I'll come back. Okay, now I'm back, and I just wanted to show you how many strings I actually cut off the quilt top. And I am now ready to square it up. So I know from my quilt top that I need 74.5 inches for my border. So what I'm going to do is use a tape measure, and I'm going to approximately cut that down because I don't want to cut the extra 5 or 6 inches I have because I can use that in my next border. So I'm going to just cut something, say about 76 inches long. And the reason why I do it like this instead of just folding in half and cutting is because I can estimate where my seam is going to end on the other end, like down here. So I know that if I just take this seam loose or cut right here, then I can use these 4 strips in the next quilt, but down at the other end I have 75.5 inches available to me. So that's what I'm going to do. Slide this down. I know that I can keep these 4 strips on. So I'm just going to cut right on the seam line because it will be squared up later. So it doesn't really matter. So let me put the camera in view. I'm sorry. Didn't realize it wasn't in view. So I want to cut these 4 off. So I'm just going to lay the rotary cutter up there. I could have taken this loose with my seam ripper, but it's no big deal because I'm cutting up strings. It's not cut to size anyway. So now I know I have a piece that's approximately 75.5 inches, so it's way more than what I need to get my border together. I'm going to put this back up for a moment, and then I'm going to just fold this in 4s so that I can cut it to the width that I need. And for this quilt, I'm actually using I'm cutting 10.5 for a 10-inch finished border. So that's my top. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is line it up on any line on the cutting board, but I want to make sure that I'm over whatever line I'm registering towards, and want to make sure all of my pieces, my ends, are over that line. So that's at line 14. So then I need to make sure I have room down here at 3.5. See. So I need to make sure I got room down at 3.5. And I do all the way down. So I'm just going to take my ruler, line it up on the lines on the mat, cut across. Since I've got a lot of seams, sometimes I may have a little straight thread here or there, but that's because of all the seams folded all over each other. And then I want to do the same thing down at 3.5, since I started at 14, because I'm looking for 10.5 inch. So I'm going to step around to the other side. I always try to move my items before I move my ruler. The next thing is to cut this into 74.5 inches long. So what I do is I extend off my mat. I put one of my edges up against a line to make sure it's straight. So I'm going to take the 10-inch mark on the ruler, place it on the edge, and then I'm going to go down to the end where the measuring tape ends, and I'm going to stick a pin in there, just like that. Okay. So now I have a pin right here. Okay, I'm going to take this pin and put it on the 0 line. And then continue to line up all the way down. And I need 37.25. So because I've already marked off 10 up at the top, I need 27.25, which is my mark down here. So I'm going to cut 27.25 here. Now notice when I measured, I made sure that I wouldn't have any little pieces being cut like right here. I wanted to make sure to avoid having little pieces or just having 1/4 inch left on the end of my strip set. So when I flip back, because I used the measuring tape, I know that I'm only going to cut 1/4 over this 27 line, so my seams are going to be pretty cool up under there. Alright, and then there's just one final step before I sew this onto my quilt top, and I'll show you that on the ones that I've already sewn onto the quilt. So here are the here's one border that I've sewn to one of the sides, and I'm always picking up strings as I'm working, so it's always strings in there. But one thing that I want to talk about is when you have a pieced border, the last and final step before I sew this onto my quilt top is I determine which side is going to be to my quilt. Meaning, is this gray going to be on this end of the quilt, or do I turn the entire thing and put the gray on the other end of the quilt, which is back here? Okay, so once I determine which way the border is going onto the quilt, the side that is not going to the quilt, I go ahead and do a little stay stitching very close to the end, about 1/8 of an inch away. And I think you can see it in the green. But I do that down the entire length. And that way I don't have to worry about my seams coming loose when it's time for quilting. It helps to stabilize the quilt edges. And when I go across this way, which is what I'm about to work on now, let me show you another piece. Hold on. And when I come back this way on the quilt, and this part here actually has that little seaming that I was talking about, but I know it's going to be caught in my seam, so I didn't worry about that because I was really trying to keep the other piece of fabric that was next to this that was very thin. One thing that I also do is when I put the border on the top and bottom, it's going to extend off of the side. Where I've already stitched this, the border is still going to extend up. So what I like to do is also stitch the sides of the strip set. So when I stitch this strip set here, I'm actually stitching up the sides as well as along the length that's not going against the quilt. And that just helps to keep everything stabilized, gives me something that I can use to keep from fraying when I get to my long arm machine, because it could be a bias edge out there on the end, and if it is, it will start to stretch. I hope you enjoyed how I work with my strings to make borders for quilts.